Hi everyone, and welcome to Brainbox Unleashed. Today we'll be covering the first lesson from the book Social Change and Development in India. For class 12, in the book Social Change and Development in India, the first chapter is called Structural Change. So, first, let us see what this lesson talks about. The entire chapter can be summarized into 4 concise points, which will tell us exactly what is talked about in this chapter. Okay, so firstly, it talks about how colonialism shaped contemporary India, how British colonialism shaped and molded the Indian society that we know today. Then it talks about the structural changes that were brought about by the British colonialism. Okay, and these structural changes didn't happen alone, they were accompanied by some structural changes. Then it also goes on to talk about mainly two kinds of structural change, that is industrialization and urbanization. And then finally, it shows the difference between the industrialization and urbanization that happened during the colonial times and industrialization and urbanization in independent India or after India gained independence. Okay, so let us begin. Before we understand structural change, we need to understand what colonialism is. So, colonialism simply means the establishment of rule by one country over another. When a stronger country, be it economically or militarily, when it establishes its rule on over a weaker country, then that is colonialism. Okay, so they exert their dominance over the weaker country and establishes a rule there. So that is colonialism. Now, historically, India has had many numerous foreign invasions, right? Be it by the Arabs, the Persians, the Turks, the Mongols, and even Mughals, who ruled us for over 300 years. So, but the Mughal rule was a bit different than the other foreign invasions because, like the invasions by the Arabs, Turks, they had come here mainly to loot and plunder. But the Mughals, they did not do that. They came here, they became a part of the Indian culture and used the resources of India for the governance of the Indian people. Okay, so they didn't take back anything to their own country. Instead, they settled down here and they ruled over the people. Then these pre-capitalist conquerors were still different from British colonialists. How? See, these pre-capitalist conquerors, they just, as long as they received money, tribute, they didn't bother with anything else. Okay, they did not interfere with the economic structure. They were not responsible for the loss of indigenous industries. The traditional Indian industries that were present, they did not interfere with those. So as long as they could take away the money, they were fine with it. They just took the surplus that was being produced by these traditional industries that were present in India. But British colonialism was different. Now, Britain had a capitalist system, right? It had a capitalist economy, and when they came here, they started interfering and they started changing the traditional Indian economic structure that was there. They started changing it, and they changed it so that it would benefit them, so that they could get maximum profit out of that change. Okay. And how did they bring about these changes? They changed the land ownership laws, like they fixed revenues, like the in the zamindari system, rayatwari and the mahalwari system, right? Then they decided what crops were to be grown and what shouldn't be grown. Like they earlier, Indian farmers, they used to grow food crops, which would help them in their own sustenance for their own livelihood. They did not grow them to sell it in the market, right? But when the British came here, they forced certain farmers in certain areas to grow cash crops that could be sold commercially, right, and which could bring in profits. So that was one of the change that happened. Then they also started interfering, meddling with the manufacturing sector, and they changed the entire way how production and distribution worked. Okay. Then in the tribal areas, what they did, like now we know the natives that live there, the indigenous people, they are the people of the land, right? They feed off the land, and land and forest mean everything to them. That's their source of livelihood, right? They go into the forest, they collect timber, they collect food, and that is how they make their living. But the Britishers, what they did was they made certain forest acts. They introduced new forest acts that restricted and even prevented these natives from going into the forest, which they had been going to earlier, right? So, and the British, they termed these forests, certain areas of the forest, as reserved forest. That means nobody was allowed to go in there and collect whatever the forest had to offer. So these were the changes that the British brought about. Now we need to understand what structural change means. Now, since we'll be seeing what kind of structural changes happen, we need to understand first, what do you mean by structural change? Now, structural change refers to the transformation in the structure of a society. This type of change includes changes in the structure of social institutions or the rules by which they are run. Structural changes are thus long-term and permanent changes. For example, globalization is a structural change. Okay, so any change in the structure of the society is called structural change. It is as simple as that. Okay, whenever there is a change in the structure of the society, it is called as a structural change. And this structural change, it includes changes in the structure of the social institutions, or maybe the rules that were there earlier. Okay, so and because of this, these structural changes become permanent and long term. For example, globalization. Now, with the coming of the globalization age, what has happened is everything is interconnected in this world, right? No country is secluded and remote now. Everything is interconnected. The people, the information, technology, everything has become interconnected. Okay, it has kind of made the world a smaller place. So globalization is a structural change. That means there has been a change in the structure. Okay, now let us see what changes were brought about by colonialism, okay, other than what we discussed. So firstly, there was movement of people from one part of India to another. For example, people from Bihar and Jharkhand were brought into Assam to work in tea plantations. So migration was happening, right? And so, most of the times this migration was not voluntary. It was done by the British. Apart from that, a new middle class was emerging, who worked as government employees, and because they were getting Western education now, they started working as doctors, lawyers, and they started moving from one part of the country to another. So again, another type of migration. Okay. Then there was also migration of people from India to distant foreign lands, to faraway foreign lands. And this was also being done by the British because they had colonies in other countries as well, right? They had colonized other countries also, like Africa and the Americas. So they needed people to work in the plantations there. So India had many people. So the people from here were, carted away in ships. They were crammed into ships, and then they were sent off to these colonized countries. And the process, this journey, okay, this sea voyage, it was so deadly that many people even died in that process. And when the people went there, some of them never returned to their home country. And the descendants of those people now are called persons of or people of Indian origin. Okay, like when you go to South Africa, you'll find these PIOs, people of Indian origin. Then even in UK you have it, and in many other countries where British had their colonies. Then some other changes that happened were unintentional. The British didn't intend for them to happen, but it happened anyways. Like now, the Britishers were only a few people, right? And India is a huge country. So to rule, to govern such a huge country, they needed people. And so they thought, like, let us create one class of Indians who would be educated and they would help us in the governance of their own country. So Western education was introduced. The English language was introduced. Okay. But the change that happened, even the Britishers didn't think would happen. With the Western education, the Indian people, they got exposed to Western ideas, and Western ideas such as liberty, equality. They learned about the French Revolution, how the common people, revolted against the oppressors. So this gave them ideas, right? And a national consciousness was growing. People started becoming more aware of how badly the Indians were being treated by the British. And so it led to the growth of nationalism and anti-colonial feeling. Now they did not want the British to stay in India any longer. Then colonialism also led to the rise of capitalism. It helped in the growth of capitalism. Now, what is capitalism? When the means of production, they are owned by private individuals or firms and not by the government, then it is called a capitalist economic system. And the main motive of a capitalist economy is profit. The main motive is profit. Okay, it is not social welfare like in a socialist economy. They work to earn profit, to generate surplus. And capitalist economy also has a very dominant and robust market system, because production is happening. Where would the produced goods go? Into the market, right? It has to be consumed as well. So it needs a strong market system as well. Okay, so now let us see how colonialism gave birth to capitalism. So in the feudal age, before capitalism, what was there in Europe? Feudalism, right? The feudal system was there. But the feudal system had become stagnant. It stopped. It stopped growing. There was no new technologies being developed. So it had become quite stagnant. And then later on, after a certain period of time, there was a relative free trade policy. Okay. Now people from Europe, they started venturing out. Like they were getting new merchant companies started coming up. They wanted to expand their trade horizons. Okay, new merchant companies started coming up, and they used to get permissions from the monarch, whichever monarch was ruling their country. They used to get permissions and go start trading with some other country, like it happened in the case of East India Company, right? The East India Company, the colonial rule started as a how did it start? It started with the East India Company, right? The East India Company was what? It was just a merchant company, and so they had come here to trade, right? But later on, the British Crown took over, and then finally it transformed into a colonial Raj. So with the free trade policy, these companies started venturing out looking for trade opportunities. And when trade was flourishing, when trade happened, they started accumulating wealth, they started getting more wealth, and they invested this wealth in technology. So new technologies were also coming out, better advanced technologies were being developed, right? And then along with the accumulation of wealth, another change had happened in Europe. The enclosure movement happened. Now we don't need to go into details about the enclosure movement, but let me just tell you this, that land was being concentrated in the hands of a few people. So the other people who were earlier using those lands now had no other source for them to earn. So they needed a market, right? And they were just free. Now they had to go work for somebody else. So a labor market had been created, which is a requirement for capitalist society. If you want to develop capitalism, you need to have a working class, a labor market. Okay, you need to have the capitalist who would provide the wealth, and the people who would work in those companies and factories. Okay, so all this changes happened, and this led to the rise of capitalism. So then this is how colonialism helped in the growth of capitalism. Now capitalism in turn had another effect. It led to the formation of nation states. So it is one of political changes, right? So what is a nation state? A nation state is one in which the majority of the people, they share relatively the same culture and is conscious of it. That means they have a strong sense of belonging, like they feel like they belong together and they are citizens of one single country. Okay, and in a nation state, the government of that state has the sovereign powers, and it is not under the country is not under any other country's rule. That means they are ruling themselves. A nation state is such. Okay, now nation states, when capitalism gave rise to nation states, the nation states gave rise to nationalism. Now since people they felt so strongly about their own country, about their own people, right? They felt like they were the same people, they belonged to a common culture, so they had an immense love for their country and people. And the principle of nationalism, it assumes that any set of people who are a nation state, they have the right to be free and exercise sovereign power. Okay, so the Indian nationalists learned about these ideas through Western education, because the British introduced Western education. The Indian people, they learned about these ideas, and they saw that the opposite was happening in India. The British people and the other Europeans, they believed in sovereign rule for themselves, but they were ruling over another country. They were ruling over Indians. So it was quite the opposite, right? So what the nationalists did, they declared Swaraj, or independence from British rule, and they fought to take back both political and economic rights from the British. Okay, so these are the changes that were brought about by colonialism. Now we come to the two most significant structural changes that are talked about in this chapter: industrialization and urbanization. So this is the industrialization and urbanization in the colonial era during the British times. Now what is industrialization? Industrialization refers to the emergence of machine production based on the use of inanimate power resources like steam or electricity. So it's very simple. You get a hint from the term itself, from the name itself. It means emergence of machine production, coming up of industries, right? So, and that happened due to the use of power resources like steam or electricity, which was not there earlier, which had not been invented earlier. Steam engines came about, and then uh, industrialization happened. Okay, so what is urbanization then? Urbanization refers to the population shift from rural areas to urban areas. When people move from villages into towns and cities, then that is called as urbanization. In most traditional societies, due to low technological development, the major form of occupation was agriculture. It didn't foster other forms of occupation. Okay, so in traditional societies, because there is not much not much technological development advancement, people mostly engage themselves in agriculture. They don't try out different, and they don't have any other job opportunities. They don't have any other sources of livelihood, so the main thing available for them is agriculture. But that is not what happens in industrial societies. Industrial societies provide more avenues, more other sources from where people can start earning their living. Like they start working in factories, offices, shops, right, instead of agriculture. Now we will see how industrialization happened differently for Britain and India. How in the industrial times, in the industrial age, how it was different in Britain and India. So let's see Britain, the first point. Industrialization happened there, and new industries started emerging. But in India, the opposite happened. Deindustrialization happened because the British were destroying the age old traditional industries that were already present in India. Like we had cotton textile industry, silk industries, handicraft industries. So these were already there. In the Indian people were already engaged in these industries. But the British, what they did was they started exporting raw materials from India and they started sending raw materials like cotton from India to Britain, and in Britain those raw materials were being used and in machines, and they were producing cheap ready-made clothes, and those clothes, finished products, were being again dumped in India. Okay, and Indian goods, if they ever reached Britain, they were heavily taxized. Okay, they were heavy taxes were put on them, so it made those Indian goods very expensive, and people did not want to buy such expensive items. They had found a substitute, and that substitute was cheap machine made goods, right? So it kind of killed the Indian handicraft industry. Then let's look at the second point. 90% of people moved to cities because it presented more job opportunities. So industrialization, when it happened in Britain, so people started moving out of the rural areas, out of the villages, and they started coming to those industrial towns and started settling there. So that means urbanization was happening. But in India again, the opposite happened. Now since the people, the handicraft industry was destroyed, people's artisans lost their job, right? Their labor was being replaced by machines. They were, India had become a dumping ground for ready-made clothes. Now nobody the people did not find the incentives to make them by hand, because the machine made goods were cheaper, so people bought cheaper ones. So it killed their jobs, and so they moved back to their own villages to start working in agriculture. So it was the opposite of what happened in Britain. In Britain, urbanization happened. In India, de-urbanization happened, right? Then there was growth of towns and cities over there in Britain, but here in India, there was a decline of old urban centers like Surat, Masulipattnam, Dhaka, Thanjavur, Murshidabad. So Dhaka was very famous for its muslin cloth. It was very famous all over the world. Okay, and there was a huge demand for it. But then the British came, they started destroying all these industries. They started imposing heavy taxes. The raw materials were being sent out. They were not being used in the Indian production. So all these urban centers that had come to be started declining now. Instead, colonial cities, colonial cities started emerging, like Mumbai, Kolkata, Chennai, and these were mainly port cities. They were near the sea. And this was also done because it served British interests, right? The port cities helped for the export of raw materials so that cotton and jute and everything could be exported, and for finished goods which were cheap, they could be imported into India and sold in the Indian market. Now Indians were buying those cheap goods. So Calcutta was redeveloped in such a way that 3/4 of raw cotton were shipped through the city. The port city of Calcutta, the Britishers had made it in such a way, they had redeveloped it in such a way that 3/4 of the raw cotton that India produced were being sent to Britain through this city. So these were huge changes that were being brought about in the Indian economic structure, right? So now let us take tea plantations as an example, because usually what happens is industrialization. When industrialization happens, urbanization follows, right? But it doesn't always happen that way, like we just saw, and also we will see with tea plantations. So British people, the British government and the British East India Company, they set up, or they started tea plantations in places where it was favorable, like in Assam. Okay, and Assam at that time was very sparsely populated. Many people did not live there, and these tea plantations, it required a lot of people. So people from Jharkhand, Bihar, and all those areas, they were being brought in huge numbers, in thousands. And since there was a change in place, right, people used to live, the climate is obviously different in Bihar and Assam, and also the living conditions of these people, of these laborers that were being brought in, was so bad that fevers and other kinds of diseases started breaking out. And so these people, they did not want to come here to work, to Assam. Okay, and instead of giving them incentives and monetary perks, like if they would have given them incentives, maybe they would be more willing to come, more willing to work in these plantations. But instead, what the British did was they used fraudulent methods, and they introduced oppressive laws which would punish them if they did not come to work. Then the system of indentured labor also came about. Now, what is indentured labor? The laborers that were being brought in, they were made to sign a contract, and the contract said that you have to work for us, that is the British planters. The laborers had to work for the British planters for a number of years, and it was quite a long it was quite a big amount of time that they had to work for them. And if these laborers ever broke the contracts, they were penalized and punished. Okay, so the laborers were oppressed, whereas the British planters that lived in these plantations lived a life of luxury. Everything, so many luxurious things, all kinds of luxury was available to them. They were brought in steamer boats. The Brahmaputra river flows through Assam, and so they were brought in those steamer boats through the Brahmaputra river. So it was a huge contrast. Then now we saw how industrialization and urbanization was during the colonial Raj. Now we'll see what happened in independent India. For Indian nationalists, the issue of economic exploitation became a central issue. Pre-colonial images of self-sufficient, prosperous India contrasted with the poverty of British India. Now the nationalist movement had been growing, right, in India. Now they wanted to get rid of the British. So, and the main concern for them was the economic exploitation of India, how Britishers were exploiting India economically. And they had seen that before the Britishers came to India, when the Mughals were ruling, or other rulers that were there in other parts of India, at that time, India was quite prosperous. India was a big, big player in the world economy. It was exporting goods, and India was very famous for its spices, then its textiles, the silk muslin cloth, like I just said. But when the Britishers came, India had become a poor nation. Earlier, India was Sone ki chidiya, the golden bird, right? But after the British came, it had become very poor. It had become impoverished. So this is what the nationalists were not happy about. So they wanted to do something that could change this. And like I said earlier as well, Western education exposed them to Western ideas of liberty, equality, and democracy, and they wished that India could also live along those ideas. If equality and liberty could be followed in India as well, and they saw that poverty was actually preventable. The Britishers, they had purposely invented poverty in India. The famines, they were all man-made, that happened in India, right? Because all the raw materials were being exported out of India, so there was nothing left for the Indian people. And they had seen how Indians were being oppressed that way. So it gave more boost to the freedom struggle. Then when India became independent in 1947, the 5-year plans were introduced. I'm sure you must have read that somewhere. And in the first 5-year plan, Nehru gave importance, Jawaharlal Nehru, the first Prime Minister of India, he gave importance to agriculture in the first 5-year plan. And then in the second 5-year plan, he gave importance to the manufacturing sector, because he believed that if India was to come out of its poverty, it had to go in industrial. He wanted to industrialize India, because that would create more jobs, and it would increase the productivity, more goods would be produced. So he thought that was India's ticket out of poverty. Okay, then what was the urbanization scenario in independent India? Let's see that. So M.S.A. Rao, he was a professor of sociology and a founding member of the Department of Sociology at Delhi University, and he talks about 3 kinds of urbanization that happened in the first 2 decades after independence. So in the first case, there were villages where a large number of people, they were migrating to faraway towns like Bombay or Calcutta to work, and even abroad, say Africa and Britain. And they were sending back money to their hometown, and they were building big lavish homes for themselves. Then they were investing in land, they were investing in industry, they were even donating to educational institutions. So a change was happening in this village, right? It was becoming more and more urbanized. So that was one kind of urbanization. Then in the second kind of urbanization that happened was seen in villages which were situated near an industrial town. For example, Bhilai, which is famous for its steel plant, the Bhilai steel plant, which was established with the help of Soviet Russia, right? And when such a situation prevailed, where a village would be situated near an industrial town, some of the villagers would get completely uprooted. Okay, and the village structure would be completely destroyed. Whereas in some villages, the lands would be acquired for making uh, towns, and because there was an industrial uh, plant there, it needed workers, so more people started coming in from different parts of India, and these people, they needed houses, so the demand for houses and a market increased within these villages. So again the village structure was changing, right? And this even brought about a change in the social structure as well. Like there were relationship problems between these immigrants and the native villagers. So you can see how urbanization was happening here. Then the third kind of urban impact he talks about is the growth of metropolitan cities. Metropolitan cities are towns, and they are big cities, right? Mega cities. And here too, when these cities were coming up, when these metropolitan cities were coming up, few villages were getting totally absorbed because they had to expand, right? These mega cities, they needed huge uh, areas for expansion. Some villages were getting totally absorbed, whereas from others, lands were being taken. So, again, you see another kind of urbanization happening. Then, independent India has seen a huge increase in the number of towns and cities as well as urban population. Now, in the British times, during the colonial Raj, deurbanization was happening, but in independent India, urbanization was happening at a greater scale. For example, in 1951, 17.2% of the population lived in towns. But in 2011, that figure increased to 31.16%. So you can see it was a huge difference. Then in 1951, the decennial growth of urban population was 41.42%, which increased to 31.80% in 2011. So this was quite opposite to what was happening during the British times. So I hope you've understood this chapter, and let me know down in the comment section if you want me to continue in English or if you want me to include Hindi as well. Thank you for listening.